You want to go ahead and start off by telling us your name?
Duane Francis Bolliger.
And today's date is May 21st, 2017. What is your birthday?
January 14th, 1923.
1923. Where were you born?
I was born on a farm in Pottawatomie County, Iowa.
Where's Pottawatomie County?
We might.
It's north of Council Bluffs, Iowa.
And did you grow up there, or did you grow up somewhere
No,
else?
I lived there until I was 4 years old, and then we moved to a little closer to Missouri Valley, Iowa, and it was in Harrison County. My dad bought a much nicer farm.
What kind of farm was it?
Well, we had running water, which was great for a farm back in those days. No electricity, but we had running water. I can't read lips.
My voice on. You also had a telephone.
We had a telephone, yes. And he had 160 acres, and we had horses and cattle and pigs and chickens and geese. We had everything.
What was your favorite part of the farm growing up?
Well, when we first moved there, we had a big orchard, which we had most all of the fruit trees. We also had a big garden every summer.
And how would you describe the farm? What was it like?
Well, we were in what was called the hills, and we had, I guess you could call it a hilly farm, but it was real good farmland. We always raised good crops.
Did you like growing up on a farm?
Yes, yes. Back in those days, if you lived on a farm, you always had plenty to eat. And so we had a better life than the people that lived in town.
All right, let's talk about your parents for a while. Who were your parents? What were their names?
Fred William Bolliger was my dad, and my mother was Agnes Christine Tamasia.
And what were they like? What were your parents like?
They were very nice. I had good parents. My father came from a German family, and they had 2 boys and 2 girls. But his brother passed away when he was quite young, probably 10 or 11, I believe. And he also lived on the farm. In fact, my grandfather came from Germany, and he started farming, and he eventually owned 3 farms, and he eventually owned some buildings in the Missouri Valley, the town. So he did real well, my grandfather. His first wife, my grandfather's first wife, passed away when I was real young. I guess I was about 4 years old. And then he brought a new wife in from Germany, and she only spoke German. So when I would go with my dad to visit his stepmother, they always spoke German, and I just sat there and ate cookies.
Do you speak German now, or
No, never did.
Never did. How would you describe your relationship with your parents?
Very good. I had very good parents, and I loved them both.
And did your mother work on the farm too, or did she have a different job?
No, we all worked on the farm.
Okay.
In fact, she came out and helped, not in the fields, but she would help milk cows, and she would help feed the animals, and she
She worked hard.
kept busy all day.
Did you ever get into trouble? Don't lie.
Not really. No, I behaved pretty much.
All right, well, one of these questions, and I'm curious to know the answer. What was the worst thing you did? It's the time you got in trouble the most. Without incriminating yourself.
I have to admit I can't think of anything. When I was real young, I think the biggest trouble I ever got in was I was driving a car and I put a dent in my dad's car. That was probably the worst thing I ever did. But it was just a small dent, and we never did fix it. We just left it that way.
Do you remember what kind of car that was?
It was a Model A Ford.
Did a lot of people own vehicles during that time?
Yeah, about that time they did. It was a 1929 Ford. As long as I can remember, we always had cars. Yeah.
You want to talk about your siblings? Introduce them?
Okay. I was the youngest in the family. My oldest was a sister named Loretta. And then next was, she was 11 years older than I. Then next was a boy named Jack. He was 9 years older than I. And then Marguerite, she's 3 years older than I. So there was 4 children in the family. And I was the youngest.
You're the youngest? And what was life growing up with them?
We had a good life. Well, my mother came from a large family of 11. So I had a lot of uncles and aunts and cousins. We went to the Catholic Church in Missouri Valley. And after church, the ladies would get together and they'd decide whose house they would go to on that Sunday afternoon. And they would all bring food and we'd all go to that one house. So like I said, we had a lot of cousins, a lot of uncles and aunts.
What did you look like when you were growing up?
I guess just an average American boy, white boy.
How would you describe yourself as a child?
I behaved very well, and I had chores to do, which I did every day. I had a good child life.
What is one of your first memories that you have?
When I was real young, I had a little dog named Rover, and we went for a walk over in the hills, and my folks thought I was lost because I was gone so long, but I came back home and I did get a little talking to that time. I shouldn't have gone so far, but that was one of my memories.
What kind of dog was Rover?
Just a common. I don't know what brand he was, but he was a
Big dog, little dog?
No, he's a normal sized dog, about the same size as Benny.
Okay. So about 50, 60 pounds?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have a nickname growing up?
No, I never did. They always went by Duane.
And who were your best friends growing up?
Well, I had, I would say my cousins. One of my cousins named Gene Eric. He was 6 months older than I, and he would come and stay with me, and I would come and stay with him. I also did that with some other cousins, but Jean was my closest cousin.
Back then on the farm, what did you think your life was going to be?
I really didn't like the farm. It was all work and no pay. So when I got older, I decided I was going to leave the farm and find a job in town of some kind.
About what age did you decide that?
I probably decided that when I was probably about the 9th or 10th grade in high school. I had an older brother, and because he did most of the farm work, and when we got a tractor, he got to drive the tractor and I had to drive the horses.
So that's when you decided.
That's when I decided I would move to town.
So you mentioned school. I guess we can start talking about school now.
Well, of course, I went to grade school through 8th grades.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was out in the country. I walked a mile and a half to school and then a mile and a half back home again at night. And then when I went to high school at 9th grade, the first year, my older sister and I stayed at Grandpa and Grandma's house upstairs, and we had a kitchen, and we did our own cooking and cleaning and everything. And that was the first 2 years. And then she graduated. And then I started driving from home and taking other children to school,
High school?
to high school. And I charged them 50 cents a week to ride, which paid for my gas. So I did that the last 2 years of high school.
And was that the Ford that you were driving?
I drove I had a Model T. My sister was teaching school, so she had a little bit of money. So she bought this Model T, which was a 1922 Model T, for $20, and my dad and I fixed it up, and I drove that to and from school. Except sometimes in the winter when it got real cold, my dad would let me drive his car, which had a heater in it. But I did that the last 2 years of high school.
What was your school like, the first grade through 8th grade?
Well, that was just the country school, and all 8 grades were in the same one classroom.
Did they just assign you work and
Yeah.
you did it, or did they get up front and try to teach everyone at the same time?
No, each class would come up front at one time and go through their classes. And while they were up there, you were supposed to be studying in your own book.
Did you study or did you?
I didn't have any trouble. I got along well in school.
What were your favorite classes or favorite subjects?
Math. Math and I would say geography.
What would you do in school for fun?
Well, we always had recess, and then we had lunch, and we always had some sports of some kind. We played ball, and we played, I don't know what to call it.
Fox and goose?
No, when you run across, and if you didn't get caught, you got to the other side. I don't remember what that was called. Do you know? Anyhow, we played games at recess and then lunch. But I carried my own lunch for all 8 years in a paper sack and ate my own lunch.
What would be a standard lunch that you would bring?
Probably a sandwich and an apple and maybe a cookie. A lot of peanut butter and jelly back in those days.
I still eat peanut butter and jelly.
Delicious.
It holds up. Are you still friends with anyone from grammar school, or did you keep in touch after?
And through high school, I kept in touch with a couple of them up until just the last few years.
You heard there's any left.
In high school, we had a reunion every 5 years, which I didn't get to all of them, but I got to most of them. And that's when I would see them.
What town was the high school in?
Missouri Valley.
Missouri Valley.
Were there individual classrooms for
Yes.
different grades?
Yeah. In fact, there were quite a few. The class I was in, which I graduated in 1940, was the first class that reached 100 children. The one I didn't like was English. I never did well.
Like your dad.
Yeah.
A lot of schooling has a lot to do with the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Did you have a favorite teacher?
I had an unfavorite,
What was his or her name, and why were they?
Mrs. Gleason.
Mrs. Gleason. All right. Why did you not like Mrs. Gleason?
Well, because she was teaching English, and I guess I just didn't like that subject either.
Was it just the books that you didn't like, or was it?
Well, I never did study it. I just, if I didn't like it, I just kind of passed it up.
What kind of student were you in high school? How were your grades?
I was just average,
Average?
B's and C's. Yeah.
B's and C's. And then after high school, where did you go? Did you go to university?
No, I went to Omaha, and I worked in a Omaha cold storage, cutting the legs and the heads off a chicken as they went down the assembly line. And I did that for, maybe 6 or 7 months is about all. And then I got a job working in a little restaurant called Harkett's. And I started out at, I worked 6 days a week, $15 a week, all I could eat. And then after about 6 months there, where they cut it back to 5 days a week, and I got a big raise up to $25 a week. So I was doing much better. And I worked in a restaurant for, I'd say, year and a half. And then the war was coming along, particularly within Germany. Well, Germany was already fighting over there. Anyhow, there was some military work to be done. So when I was in the restaurant, a cousin of mine came in, and he said, "Can you run a bulldozer?" And I said, "Well, I think so." So, or can you work in this government job? And yeah. So anyhow, he took me out, and I got a job as a oiler on machines or running the bulldozer. And I went from $25 a week to $125 a week. So I worked there until the job was completed, about 1 year.
Where was this? Was this in
This is Meade, Nebraska.
Nebraska?
Mm-hmm. And then when that job was completed, it was in the fall, and then my cousin Gene Eric, well, I guess he had been working there also. So he and I got together and we decided we're going to drive to California and get a job at Consolidated Aircraft, because they were looking for men, or they wanted help out there. So we drove to California, San Diego, and got a job at Consolidated Aircraft. Now that was in probably 1942, because the war was on, and we could have got deferred if we wanted, but we didn't apply for that. Anyhow, we both got our notice to come back to Iowa because we were going to be drafted. So we sold our cars out in San Diego and took the train back to Missouri Valley, and then we got drafted and went into service. We came back in 43, probably January 43.
And what branch of the military were you enlisted in?
Air Force.
Air Force.
Well, it was the Army Air Corps at that time. And they assigned me to a mechanic school. So I was studying to be a aircraft mechanic. And then they came around and said, would you like to be a pilot? And so naturally, as a young one, I'd want to be a pilot. So I signed up, well, Gene and I both signed up to be a pilot, or take the training anyhow. And then we had a bunch of physicals, and my cousin Gene had a problem with an ear, so he couldn't fly. They wouldn't accept him. But I had already signed up, so I had to go. We had to be separated. So I went to schooling for pilot training, which took 2 years. And then I became a pilot in February of 45. I graduated. And I was I was assigned to the Pacific. And both times my orders were canceled because they had more pilots than they had airplanes. And then they made me an instructor. I was good at instrument landings. So then they made me an instructor of instrument landings, and I was teaching older pilots. I was giving them a refresher course on instrument landing. So I did that until I was discharged in September of 45.
So instrument landings, that's using, can you describe what that is?
It's landing when you can't see the airport, you can't see the runways. It's strictly instrument landing. You read the instruments and you land the airplane by the instruments.
When you taught them, didn't you use that?
Link trainer?
Yeah, link trainer.
Like, was it a simulation?
Yes.
Simulation? Mm-hmm. And where was the academy? Where were you stationed waiting?
There's at Luke.
Where's
Luke
that?
Airfield. Part of Phoenix.
Part of Phoenix.
Mm-hmm. That's where I graduated and that's where I stayed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. That's why I liked Phoenix.
So how would you describe your pilot education and the training that you did?
It was really quite difficult. In high school, of course, I just had high school, which was, fairly easy. You didn't have to do much studying, but all the things they taught us for pilot, you really had to study. You had books and you studied at night. But the only thing wrong was they gave it to you so fast that you couldn't retain it. You retain it long enough to pass all the tests, but then like now I can't remember anything of it. Because you learn the Morse code, and we had to, you had to be able to run the 40-yard dash in so many seconds. We had to be able to run 1 mile without stopping. And we had to be able to swim 1 mile without stopping.
How did you feel like emotionally while the war was going on? Did it worry you and your family? Or did it feel far out? It was fighting in Europe.
It didn't feel very close.
Yeah.
No. I didn't really... Well, I had some cousins that was in the war, but I I was so busy that pilot training that I
Yeah, it's not a bad place to be.
didn't have time to worry about anything else. And we didn't get any, when I was going through the pilot training, you didn't get any time off on weekends. Now, after I graduated, I did, but up until then, you stayed at the camp usually in the weekends and studied, and of course we had parades and all that going along with the military.
Were you disappointed that you didn't get to go actually fly during the war, or were you happy that you were back educating?
I was just as happy that I didn't have to go.
How do you think your service changed you?
Well, I actually would say I probably grew up more in the service and learned more. It was good training.
Did you keep in touch with people from?
No, I didn't. I got separated twice because they kept messing people around, so to speak. They got too many in this class or too many in that class, so I don't know whether they started with the A's and then the B's, but I would usually get transferred from this class over to another class, and so I didn't stay in touch with any of them. When I was at Bakersfield base, I was probably there, 2 months. But in my barracks was a boy that I became very friendly with, and he got engaged, and I stood up with him. I was his best man when he got married. But then he went to, after we got out of that training, he was transferred to some base in Texas, and I was transferred to the base at Luke in Phoenix, so we separated. I would say we probably wrote about 2 letters and then forgot it, I guess.
How did your service end?
They, of course, came around and asked if you wanted to stay in or leave, and I was ready to leave. So I was discharged.
And you said September of 1945?
Yes.
Well, we can talk about how you met Grandma.
Okay, I came home. I was at Missouri Valley, and it was on a Friday night, and they had a football game at Missouri Valley. So I went to the football game, and that's when I met Helen at the football game. She was with my cousin's wife. Gene, my cousin that was my best friend, he married a girl named Millie. And Helen was with them when she entered. And that's when I met you on a Friday night.
That's right.
I had, then the next night was Saturday night, and my girlfriend from Omaha came up, and we went to a dance, and she was there again. And then the next day was a Sunday. Where did we meet on Sunday?
Out at Millie's house, Mildred's.
Oh, we went out there, okay. And then I was going to take my girlfriend Ruth back to Omaha. And my mother said, well, she can ride with you, or something like that, wasn't it?
Because I'm taking the bus.
So there I was with 2 girls in the front seat, going back to Omaha. And that's how I met her, was at the football game.
When did you start dating? Was it soon after that?
Soon after that, I was still going with this Ruth. But when I took her back in Omaha, well, I took her to her, she was teaching school out west of Omaha, across the road from Boys Town.
That's neat.
Yeah. And so then I knew where she was. I didn't know her telephone number. I knew her name, that was all. But anyhow, then I a couple of nights later, a week later, whatever it was, I drove out to see her, and we went out on a date, and that's when it started.
Do you remember where we went?
No, I don't remember where we
You
went.
took me to dinner out at Stockyards. Johnny's.
Johnny's? Oh,
Cafe.
yeah. Yeah, it was a famous steakhouse in Omaha. What, 2 years later we got married?
Oh, about a year and a half.
About a year and a half.
You want to talk about your wedding ceremony? Where it was and how would you describe it?
Okay. Well, we decided to get married in my hometown, Missouri Valley, at the Catholic Church. And who was supposed to give you away? Some uncle?
My brother, but,
Your brother Buck?
yeah. He was
Yeah.
supposed to give me away.
But he didn't make it. So then your uncle was there. So, Uncle Fred. So, I was standing up there and they came down the aisle and we got married in June the 3rd, 1945? 47. 1947. And we've lived together ever since.
So you guys have a 70th anniversary coming up this year, then?
This year, right.
I'm curious about what job you had at this time. You said you came back to Omaha.
Yes, I went to work for the airline. It was Mid-Continent Airlines at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a small airline, and we had mostly DC-3s. And I went to work for them, and of course the airline then was growing. And I had a choice of either moving into what they called operations or sales. So I thought I would like the sales end better than the operations end. Sales end I had more freedom, I thought. Anyhow, I went into the sales end of it, and that's the end I stayed. And we worked there till 1955.
Yeah, 56.
I got an offer for a promotion up to Rochester, Minnesota. I'd be the sales manager at Rochester. So we accepted that, and we were there, what, 5 years?
6.
6 years? And they were going to, well, the airline was still growing, getting larger, and they decided that Rochester was too small a town to keep operating in, so they were going to close our operations at Rochester, so I had to move somewhere else. So at that time, they said they only had an opening in New York.
Or Texas.
Yeah, well, they didn't even say Texas that time. So when they said they had an opening in New York, I said, well, I don't want to go to New York. And in fact, I said, I don't think I will go to New York. So then they come back and said, well, we've got an opening in Houston. So I said, well, I'll take the Houston job. So we had accepted that. And about a week before we were to move to Houston, they said, well, we've now got an opening in Kansas City. Would you rather have Kansas City? So I said, yes, I'd rather have Kansas City, because my folks were still alive up in Missouri Valley. So we accepted the offer in Kansas City, so we moved to Kansas City and been here ever since.
How old were you when you started having children?
Well,
Or
we were
what
24
year?
when we got married, and then we had one the first year, so we were 25.
When did you first find out that you were going to be parents?
Well, we got married in June.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she got pregnant the very next month in July. Well, probably July or August of 47.
And how did you feel? Were you excited, scared, both?
Well, I think we were excited. I know I was. I picked the name for Terry. And I know she picked the name for Ken. And I guess we picked the name for Greg then. I think that was the deal. That was our procedure. We've been very, very fortunate. We didn't have any problems of anything other than we're short of money at times when we first got married.
How did you decide to have 3 kids? Did you consider trying having a girl after Greg or anything like that?
I think she probably wanted a girl, but we just, I think we just took whatever came along.
That's right.
We always wanted a girl, probably, but it worked out. We were happy with what we had.
Can you describe the moment when you saw your child for the first time?
I was very happy we had a normal, healthy child.
And how has being a parent changed you?
Well, I think it made us grow up a little bit. Would you want to hear about a tragedy, though? Or a sad story once?
Mm-hmm.
If you want to share?
Okay. When Ken was real little, he was a baby, I don't know how old he was. He had a little growth on his neck, back of his neck, so we had to take him to the hospital, and we had to leave him overnight. And as we were leaving, boy, he started crying, and I didn't want to leave. That was probably my hardest part, was leaving him when he was crying, and it was really heartbreaking. But that was a very tender
He was
moment.
only about 6 months old.
Yeah, he was such a little thing.
What were your children like? What was Terry like growing up? I'm sure they all had different personalities.
Yeah, they were pretty much the same. Greg was always different. Both Terry and Ken were active, and they went out and played with other children much more than Greg. Greg, I think, stayed in or stayed home more than they did. But they all got along with other children. They never had any problem. But Greg was more of a loner than Terry and Ken.
Did they get along with each other, or were they just normal brothers? Kind of.
I think they got along okay.
You moved to Kansas City in what year again?
1962. Terry was in the 9th grade. Ken was in the 8th grade. And Greg, first grade.
So you were in sales
Yeah.
in Kansas City. And what airlines was this? Was this still Mid-Continent?
Then it was Braniff.
Braniff.
No, it was Braniff. I was in passenger sales.
Passenger sales. And did you like that job?
Yeah, it was a good, easy job.
Did it have perks to it? Would they give you free stuff or let you fly for free? Or
Oh yeah, we got to, yeah, in fact, after we were there 25 years, you got what you called it looked like a credit card, but you could just go up and show your card and you could fly any place on that airline, right? Mm-hmm. But and then if you wanted to ride on another airline, you had to apply for a pass on the other airline. But yeah, we had good benefits that way.
yeah.
Where were some of your favorite places that you went, that you traveled?
Well, I liked Mexico. We went to Mexico many times. We went to Hawaii. Hawaii is very nice. We only had one trip to Europe. Now I had some business. I had a business trip to London, and I had 3 business trips around South America, and that is where you take people and show them the area. Well, we flew to New York
World's Fair.
and took all 3 children, stayed at a hotel downtown, and rode the subways out to the World's Fair.
What type of vacations are your favorite? Do you like, if you go to Europe, you're doing sightseeing. If you go to Mexico, I don't know if you're relaxing or just on the beach or.
Acapulco, that's all you could do is relax.
Yeah.
Go swimming and you could go night clubbing, and well, we went to see the divers. It was there was always something to do if you wanted to do.
Yeah. Those are fun.
Careful what you eat in Mexico.
Right. So do you prefer those leisurely trips more than the sightseeing trips where,
Yeah, I did. I'd like to go back to see Hawaii again, and I liked Alaska. That was nice.
Did you work the same job in Kansas City for
All those years.
all those years?
Yes. Well, the last couple of years, I was in what we call passenger sales, and the airline, we had the 727, which was they called it a quick change, where you could take the seats out and then have a cargo liner. Instead of passengers, you had all cargo. So we didn't have any salespeople or anybody promoting cargo in or out of Kansas City, so they assigned it to me. So I was also a cargo salesman along with the passenger salesman, and which I liked real well. It was different, and we did real well with that until the airline went bankrupt.
What year was this? What year did the airline go bankrupt?
82.
82?
In February of 1982. So then, of course, I lost my job and everything then. I went around looking for jobs for a long time.
About 6 months.
Well, I found one job as selling for a truck line, and I didn't do well at all at that. In fact, I did poorly. I got some cargo lined up, and it was supposed to be a whole truckload, and then I couldn't get the truck. They had problems. So anyhow, that job didn't last very long. So then they started a new line called SMB, and some of they started out at Dallas. It went from Dallas to Oklahoma City to Wichita, Kansas City to Chicago. So, but the headquarters was in Dallas. So some of those people down there knew of me, so they called and asked me if I wanted to go into what all was cargo sales for that airline. So I said, sure. So I went to work as a cargo salesman for SMB. And that time my office would be out at the airport, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked for them until they closed up. And then
You went to that airline.
yeah, what's the next company I worked for? And then this next company was still in cargo sales. And Braniff Airlines had started up again. And this company had the cargo bins with Braniff Airlines. So that meant we could just take smaller stuff that would fit in the cargo bin. And they gave me that job selling for that airline, which worked out for several years. And the biggest the biggest customer I had was moving puppies from Kansas City to New York. And they were selling them puppies back there for $500 a piece. So every day we had a bunch of puppies. But we had to be sure none of them got too hot or too cold or died or anything. And I think we only had one instance where one puppy died. So we had real good luck. But that lasted quite a while.
Was that your last job?
That was my last job.
And then when did you retire?
When I was 65, right.
Were you looking forward to retirement? Like,
I think so. I was ready to retire.
what were you planning on doing while you were retired? Or just
Playing golf.
yeah.
Well, that's when we decided to go to Arizona every winter. And we did it for over 20 years.
Did you play golf a lot before you retired?
No,
You
very little.
Yeah.
In fact, I was working for Braniff, that they didn't recommend it at all. Now, when I was working for that other airline selling cargo, that company did recommend, and I played golf, maybe 3 times would be about all, in tournaments with customers, you might call it, right? But that golf was pretty good. You could take a customer out and play golf, and that helped you get more business. You got better acquainted that way.
How did you feel about your children's accomplishments, or how do you feel about your children's accomplishments?
I often felt I probably should have helped them more, but I was real satisfied with what they were doing.
Yeah.
I didn't really interfere either way. They all had decent jobs, worked good.
Yeah. How do you like being a grandparent?
Being a grandparent,
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I would have been happy if I had a lot more grandchildren.
Yeah.
We were real pleased with our grandchildren that we did have.
Looking back at your life and maybe comparing how you thought it would turn out to how it did turn out, do you have any regrets in your life?
I don't have any regrets, but I do feel I could have probably done better, done more, probably got more promotion or made a little more, but
Yeah.
we always had enough to get by.
Who has been the most important person in your life?
Oh, gotta say my wife.
Yeah. What can you tell me about her? What?
Well, other than she's been very good to me, very stand by me, might say, and help me in many, many ways.
How did you feel she did, like raising the kids, or
She did very good,
yeah,
very good job.
good mother?
And she used to go buy the groceries and do all the cooking and feed us. I had a good wife.
What was your work life like? Your work and home life, the balance between the two of it. Were you pretty much out of the house most of the day until?
Yeah, my work, sometimes my work job included, or I had to work weekends, which weren't too great, but
Uh,
most of my work jobs are pretty easy.
who has been the biggest influence on your life?
I don't know, I guess I'd have to say my dad.
And what lessons did he teach you?
Well, particularly to if I had a job to do it, and to be responsible and to be on time and to do everything I'm supposed to do. My dad was lenient. He never gave me trouble, but he just would talk to me.
How has life been different than you'd imagined?
I think it's part of what I thought life would be like. I didn't plan anything different.
How would you like to be remembered?
Favorably,
Yeah.
as a good father and a good person.
Well, that won't be difficult.
Right.
Do you have any fears? Fear of heights? Fear of
No.
spiders? None? No?
Nothing really.
When did your parents pass away and how did it happen?
My father was 89. 3 more months, he'd have been 90. And he just passed away from old age.
Yeah.
And how old was mother when she passed away now? I don't remember.
About 86, I think.
I think my mother lived, what, 2 years longer?
Mhm.
And then she passed away at 86, again from old age.
They both had heart problems.
So was it hard losing?
Well, we were living here and they were living up in Missouri Valley.
Mm-hmm.
So we weren't there, very often.
Yeah.
But they had a good life.
Which of your siblings have passed away?
My oldest sister passed away.
We were just on our way to Alaska.
Yeah, I know. What year was that? We went through that.
Uh,
Alaska was 98?
97, 98?
Okay, in
it was
98.
that same year.
And then my brother passed away. Goodness. Was he 96, wasn't he? We were in Arizona, so it had to be in March, at the very end of March. And his son Doug called us. And
Address
they
has a lot of stuff there.
waited 3 or 4, they waited 4 days before they had the funeral, so it gave us time to get back and get up for the funeral. So it was that clear at the end of March.
What are some of your favorite sports to watch? His favorite sports teams?
Well, right, of course, now I gotta say baseball with the Royals. They're not doing too good right now, but we try to watch them. And of course, I do watch the football Chiefs. They'll have a better team this year because they might have a new quarterback coming. Not into basketball. We don't have a basketball team here, so I'm not into basketball. Golf, they got a lot of young players coming up that are really good. But Tiger Woods is gone. Phil Mickelson was a favorite to watch. And, well, this Jason Day's good. Oh, a lot of good golf players coming up. I do watch golf. I watch all the sports, really.
You have any favorite books or movies or stories?
I read a lot of Western stories. Now, don't ask me the author. The one is Lamore, and the other was
Johnston.
Johnston. Yeah, those two would be my favorites.
Author.
But I have to get large print. If I don't get large print, I can only read for maybe a half hour and my eyes get tired.
When did you start wearing glasses?
Uh,
About how old?
I was pretty close to 50 when I started wearing glasses. Because when you went through the pilot training, you had to be, everything had to be okay or you wouldn't make it. So I had 20/20, my hearing was good. Well, I think it's great that your mom's going to finally retire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. My dad, I don't know. He has no plans to retire that I know of.
No, he doesn't want to. I think he's more comfortable working than he would be retired.
Possibly.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, he's pretty young yet to retire.
Well, yes.
I mean, he's
62.
62. So I think if he hits 65 and they ask him to retire, then he probably would. But if they don't ask him, he'll probably just stay around until someone notices that he still hasn't.
Well, Terry's going to wait till he's 70, and I think Ken is too.
Well, Terry's semi-retired, right? He's a bus driver now.
That's all he does, right?
Yeah.
But he's going to wait till he's 70 to take his Social Security because I guess it'll amount to quite a bit more.
Which of your kids has the best sense of humor?
I think they're all good.
Yeah.
Sense of humor. Probably Ken.
Ken,
I don't know. He and Terry both do.
they're
But Greg's
they're
more,
all
their
they're all
dad's more
good.
quiet, like.
Yeah. He.
But he's got a pretty good sense of humor.
Yeah, I guess it's different. Yeah, Ken and Terry are really good at making you laugh.
Yeah.
But they all have good sense of humor.
I think a good kind of final question would be, like, do you have any advice that you'd just like to share with anybody?
Well, I probably should have some, but I think you're both doing real well. I think our children did well, and I think our grandchildren all did well. We're real pleased with the Bolliger family. Yeah, you guys, your last name was Bolliger.
Yeah.
Just say that they continue to.
They will continue.
Yeah.
I don't know if Greg is quite a bit like me. He probably didn't talk to you much.
I mean, maybe not deeply.
I think Terry probably talked to his children more.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I guess that would be good. I mean, to spend time with each other.
Yeah. Well, and Ken was always either selling houses or playing golf.
The family vacations seem to be a big part of your guys' life.
Yeah.
And that's one of the best things I can think of when it comes to family is
We didn't take the kids too much on
Well,
vacation.
we did. We tried to do something almost. Sometimes maybe it wasn't a real big vacation, but we used to come to those family reunions.
Well, we went to those.
We always came and we visited our families a lot, our brothers and sisters, our parents. And then we took some nice trips. They didn't fly too much with us, but
I think we took Greg with us more than we
well,
did.
because he was younger
Yeah.
and we were going more.
Greg was a good traveler. We could put him in the back seat and he would be comfortable. Whereas Terry and Ken,
Well,
we took them to Canada that time.
We went up to Canada. We went
Oh,
to Colorado with them.
Yeah.
We took them across to
Oh,
the
good. Yellowstone.
Yellowstone, and we went on out to Oregon and Idaho, where some of our family were. Took them to the World's Fair,
Yeah.
so we did quite a bit with them. We couldn't afford too much.
Now, are you going to interview women too, or just
Yeah.